Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. This episode is sponsored by GrowX Labs. Let's be real, leading a business is lonely. When the big decisions land on your desk, who do you actually talk to? That's where GrowX Labs comes in. Their executive decision support gives founders and execs direct access to a strategic sounding board. Someone who's been in the trenches and knows how to cut through the noise. Whether it's team tension, high stakes moves, or just needing to talk it out, GrowX helps you move forward with clarity and confidence. Head to growxlabs.com/mark. That's GRWX labs.com/mark and book your discovery call. Today on Mark My Words, I have a major league story about reconstructing your wealth. And I am very excited to not only get a little bit of a glimpse, gonna try not to badger my guest Matt Morizio too much with questioning about his major league journey, which already sounds really interesting. He spent 5 seasons with the Kansas City Royals, 4 as a catcher, 1 as a pitcher, and I can't wait to hear about that side because I am a humongous baseball fan. I had 2 years in a row where I had Rays pass down here in Tampa and was going to all the Rays games, and I cannot play unless we're talking about MLB The Show, but and even that is a stretch. Seems like all I can do is pitch. But anyway, putting that aside, we're really here to focus on what Matt has been doing since his playing days, and he is the founder and CEO of Reconstructing Wealth, and he wants to get you thinking about your relationship with money. And it actually, right before we met up, it kind of struck me. I'm like, I wonder what my relationship is with money. And I think I kind of answered that, but maybe Matt and I can talk a little bit about that. But just to kind of go off of his website really quick, Reconstructing Wealth for purpose-driven families. They help families and entrepreneurs manage money with clarity, conviction, and a deep sense of purpose. And they exist to help you become the hero of your financial journey. And Matt, if you wind up being the hero of my financial journey, you'll be forever in my debt. I'm Mark Schmidt, by the way. Welcome to Matt Morizio to Mark My Words. How you doing today?
Man, thanks so much. What a cool intro. I really appreciate that big time. And I don't talk much about baseball anymore because it's such a part of my past, and we'll probably get into it, but I've got a lot of kids now, and it's a whole different life that I'm living. But it's an honor. I'm doing really well. I'm excited to have this conversation. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, you're welcome. And like I always tell people, I think the thing that I put the most stress on myself about is that intro. And I meditate and I'm like, all right, how am I going to like have the most dynamic intro for this guest who's going to be on my show? So probably unnecessary stress, but I appreciate every time I get a compliment on it. So,
Yeah, for sure. Well done. It's worth it to me, at least. It made me feel good.
Well, hey, that means I must be doing something right. So I appreciate that. So, Matt, I usually go in the Wayback Machine, and again, I'm not here to talk like 30, 40 minutes about your playing days, because you said something there that is not even so much interesting as like an entrepreneur, but just as a person. It's amazing as you continue to live life and evolve, and you
Mm.
think about the phases of your life. It's like, holy moly, like, when I look back, I know your playing days go back almost 20-ish years ago now. And
Most.
when I think back 20 years ago to some of the things I was doing, and it was very cool what I was doing back then. I've been working in television, which was my dream that I was chasing. I know you talk a lot about chasing dreams, but I know that that's a phase that I personally am like, well, it was very cool, but I don't really need to like talk a whole lot about it. So it's just amazing how that is in life, and it's especially humbling to hear that from somebody who accomplished something like that not a whole lot of people can do, honestly. I sure know I couldn't.
That's funny. Yeah, it's statistically, I don't even know what the odds are, but they're really against you. Put it that way. Like less
Yeah.
less than a percent when you're a kid. Put it that way. It's
Well,
so I guess to overcome those odds is just a real feather in my cap. It's a real confidence booster to say like I can do hard things. I don't need to pay attention to the statistics necessarily if I feel like something's put on my heart to go and chase. And that sometimes gets you in trouble, but also it can get you to some mountaintops.
yeah, and that's a really inspiring lesson for anybody out there who's listening, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you've accomplished your big goal in life or not. Because I know for me, chasing my dream meant leaving my hometown, working for major like television networks, outlets, and I wound up doing that. And then as you go along, it's like, wow, I still have more goals and more things to give. And that's just life. I always tell people that when I was young, I envisioned putting my hands behind my head, putting my feet on a desk, and having that moment where I said, I have made it. But that doesn't really, at least for me, that doesn't happen in life. Especially when you're people like us who are constantly just wanting that challenge and chasing after something and wanting to serve and to make their mark on the world. And it, I have to imagine that that's something you can relate to as well.
Really well said. Yeah, I actually heard it. The best I've ever heard it put was from a guy named John Maxwell. Anybody not familiar with John Maxwell? He's like a leadership guru. He's written 90 books or something on leadership. And he's been doing it for 50 plus years. And he said that not everybody, but people in that room, I'm part of this high capacity leadership group that's under his company's organization. I mean, his organization. And he put it like this: I want I don't want to ever cross the finish line of the race in my life, because theoretically when you cross the finish line of the race, you're done and the best days are behind you. And I don't want to live a life where in my rear view are my best days and in my windshield are my worst. So that finish line, it's okay that it keeps moving out because it keeps driving you forward to grow more and serve more at the end of the day. So I look at it like that. Like, I don't want to ever cross the finish line on the race of my life because I don't want the best days to be behind me in my rear view.
That is an incredible way to look at it. And I feel like I didn't say it or even think it that eloquently, but I
Mm.
kind of feel like I figured that out around the time that I started thinking about doing this show. I know I was working for a company. I was there for like 10 years. It was,
Hmm.
I wouldn't say it was like the dream job. It was a dream job. Uh, I wound up getting like a buyout package. They were reorganizing, and frankly, the company is still reorganizing to this day. But I took that as an opportunity to explore the world and to go out there and see what else I could do. And I eventually figured out that I wanted to do something, not so much climb the corporate ladder, but I wanted to do something that really fulfilled me and
Yep.
really made me feel like I was making the kind of difference and impact that I wanted to make. Not that you can't do that climbing the corporate ladder, but I felt like I wasn't getting there to that uh, type of fulfillment that way. And that's when it kind of like clicked for me to start thinking about what can I do? How can I, what do I have to offer beyond the day to day grind? And that's kind of how, uh, not only when I was vlogging, which I do think about doing again sometimes, that was
Mm,
kind of like the start, but then I started doing this show and whole
cool.
backstory. I'm going to try not to dwell on that because we want to talk about you, but I
Ah,
basically
that's okay. I
got
like it.
encouraged by people like you when going to like LinkedIn local events and eventually kind of saw within myself that I could do this. And now, 6 years later, here we are on a, what is it, a Wednesday morning, and we are doing this episode. So,
That's
um,
cool.
yeah, so that's kind of how I didn't say it or think it the way you did, but I guess the point of all that was that I didn't want to get to the finish line, so to speak, in another 30, 40 years and say, I wish I would have done X, Y, and Z instead of just, you know, doing what was expected, quote unquote. So that was kind of where I was going with that.
Well said. Yeah, and I didn't. To be fair, I didn't say it that eloquently either. It was John Maxwell who's maybe you got to write 90 books before you be able to say cool things like that.
Maybe. I don't know. I guess maybe we should get started and eventually maybe we'll hit the jackpot. But I I actually so I see here I said I was going back in the Wayback Machine. I see that you actually majored in entrepreneurial and small business operations. Was
Yep.
being an entrepreneur something that you had in mind for your life outside of baseball? Was there anything, any other dreams you were chasing as you were growing up?
You know what? There was not another dream. That was my singular focus since I was about 5 or 6. I wrote into my preschool graduation yearbook, which we did have one of those. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Under that section, I wrote baseball player. Now, I wasn't alone. There was basketball players and astronauts and veterinarians and firefighters and all the things. But to me, I just held on to that proclamation of sorts and chased it. And at first I chased it because it was a lot of fun and I just enjoyed it. But then I got to play more competitively as I got older and I realized I was pretty good at it and maybe there's a chance there. And I just kept pushing. I said, well, why not me was sort of my mindset. And at an early age, I already recognized, and I don't know if this is, I don't know, divine intervention or intuition or all, if that's all the same, but I recognized that as I was looking at my teammates in high school, I grew up in Waltham, Massachusetts, so like not a huge town, not like a baseball mecca, we'll put it that way. New England isn't necessarily, it's too cold in the winter. But I remember looking at them thinking to myself, if I want to play Division 1 baseball, and I want to play professional baseball one day, I knew the odds were well stacked against me. Statistically, none of my teammates were going to do it. So I couldn't look at them as my models or even competition, the people that I needed to emulate. I needed to look beyond them, and I needed to look at people who are already doing it and people who are my peers, my age group or whatever, but in the country the best. I had to look there because if that's the standard I'm chasing, then I have to look at who's modeling that standard. And I really held on to that. And now I do that in all areas of life. Who's like an incredible dad? Who's an incredible businessman? Who's an incredible workout person, like fitness, who's incredibly fit that I can model? And I just sort of chase all of those areas of my life. But answering your question about business and entrepreneurship, I joked that I'm always an entrepreneur without any good ideas. And it wasn't until like post baseball I got into business, and I realized there's a handful of Elon Musks on planet Earth in generations. Like those are Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, like these are generational minds. The rest of us entrepreneurs just improve upon an already existing idea. And I thought to myself, all right, well, if I don't have to figure out how to fly to Mars or create the iPhone, and instead I can just get really good at something that already exists and put my own twist on it, like I could do that all day. But I took entrepreneurship, or I concentrated in entrepreneurship in school, because as a pro athlete, that mindset, that wiring, you're a bit of a maverick. Like I just explained to you, I was already doing things that my teammates and people in my life were not doing on purpose. And that plays really well in entrepreneurship, where you recognize intuitively if you want to create something, stir the pot, do something different, you quite literally by definition can't do the same as everybody else but expect to get a different result. So that's why I focused on entrepreneurship. It gave me exposure to all areas of business, and I knew my wiring and I knew my mindset, and I knew like one day I would have to be doing my own thing to be fulfilled. I couldn't, like you talked about, I couldn't find that fulfillment for my own wiring climbing the corporate ladder.
And that we could just hit stop on this right there. That's like, for me, kind of a mic drop statement as far as like why I'm here and the connection that I have with every guest. It never fails that all of us have kind of that same realization
Yep.
about ourselves, that we need to go beyond just like a corporate kind of structure, and we need to challenge ourselves and just take, like, I hate using a statement like this, like the bull by the horns, and like we can't like not do that. And I have that mentality with virtually everything that I do anyway, hopefully within reason, because there are times where you can't necessarily always be like, the go-to person and the leader and running things. Sometimes being a good leader is actually taking a step back. But
Oh yeah.
we can certainly dive into that. One thing that I also want to say, it is very, very hard to come up with an entrepreneurial idea that you can really like, be passionate about and
Yep.
make a reality to the point that you and I have. Because if I wanted to, I could just keep throwing 10 billion ideas and be like, well, let's see which one sticks and which one
Right.
sticks. But a lot of that stuff, I'm sure I wouldn't even be passionate about. So I just wanted to note that uh, the fact that you were able to go through that process and find something that you really were passionate about says a lot about you and your thought process about starting a business.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Can I say one thing about that passion? Um,
Absolutely.
as all right, thanks. As I told you, my 20 plus year focus was baseball. Of course, other things in life happened, but that was primarily my passion, my goal, my dreams. But I was 26, and that dream got ripped. It got ripped from me. It got taken from me. I had the GM or the assistant GM, the Royals at the time, called me. I was in the minor leagues, by the way. I never made it to the big leagues. I need to point that out.
Yeah.
He called me to say, "Hey, you are going to be released tomorrow from spring training of 2011," and that was the end of that dream theoretically. Like I couldn't keep the uniform on, and then I had to figure out what else am I passionate about, right? And that's a very difficult place to be when you've had such a singular focus for 20 plus years. I found that incorrectly I wrapped my identity in what I did, which was baseball, as opposed to who I was. So there's so much more to me than just baseball, although I didn't really think about it. The passion for me has always followed the commitment. I've got to tell you, I recognize like how I'm created, what my unique gifts are. I've learned that exploiting those gifts in the service of other people really brings me fulfillment. So if I'm going to use my unique gifts and exploit them in other people, that can look different. I can feel fulfillment in a million different ways if I think of it through that lens. So really, it wasn't like I was a baseball player that just loved the markets and loved stocks and loved finance and money and figuring that stuff out. Instead, what I recognized is like one of my unique gifts is helping bring clarity to what feels like a really difficult topic. I learned it post baseball when I gave hitting instructions or pitching instructions. The swing, when you really get into the intricacies of like the swing, it gets really complicated and really difficult for people to digest and understand, especially at a high level. But then I was able to break that down, help guys figure it out, see breakthrough. Some of those guys at like 13, 14, 15 years old, some of those guys got drafted, had professional careers. It was such like a cool experience. But that was me using my gift to serve somebody else. In the same way, money, as people know, my industry is phenomenal at being confusing, wrongfully, but they are. And so I make it a point to get people to understand what's happening with their money and understand how to use it as a tool to kind of fuel their purpose. And that's another use of my unique gift in the service of other people. And that's why I think I feel like a lot of fulfillment there. But I didn't know this about personal finance before I really got into it. It was the commitment to go where I felt like I was being led. I felt being called. My faith's pretty important to me. So I really feel like that was what was driving the decision. And I was obedient in those steps. And I ran hard. And as I'm in the world of personal finance, I'm seeing these breakthroughs in people's lives. And I'm like, dang, this is incredibly fulfilling. And I never even knew it would be. So that fulfillment often follows the commitment.
And that's amazing that you explored that as you were just kind of working in the field. I personally I didn't know that I had a passion for doing this. And it it's kind of funny because when I was much younger, different time in my life, uh, I always knew that I wanted to get into television and work in the industry, but I had at least like one parent who was like, they didn't really see it the way that I was seeing it because I
Mm.
think they thought I was going to go out to Hollywood and try to become Spielberg or something.
Yeah.
And all I wanted to do was maybe work at ESPN as like a technical director or, just whatever. Maybe the Tonight Show, camera person, if they even have camera people anymore. Probably not. But I just, that was the kind of thing that I wanted to do. And
Yep.
I think for a long time, it was just kind of like brushed off like, oh, why don't you just get a business degree, And that, like, I am probably one of the worst people you could ever call on to try to go through the process of getting a business degree or doing anything like that. That's where me doing something like this
Yep.
is like a good role for me because when I was going through all that, I kept just trying out all kinds of jobs. Like, I
Mm.
almost became an over the road truck driver. I had the application, but I never sent it in because my best friend's mom was like,
Wow.
very nicely, she was like, I really can't see you doing that, which was probably another way of her saying, are you nuts? Like, you know, like, what are you thinking? This isn't
Yep.
you. And I know I tried, like, being a plumber's apprentice, and I tried
Hmm.
all kinds of things, but I think it was partly because I was lost, but it was partly because I was just really interested and
Yep.
wanted to do all of these things. And that I didn't know until later on being in this field and seeing myself uh, evolve within the field that I'm in and get to the point where I'm at and then get encouraged for me to really see, especially like there's so many entrepreneurs, so many flavors of entrepreneurship. So it kind of like opened up my eyes that, oh, I really have a passion for kind of putting my feet in other people's shoes for
Mm.
a little bit and, just I always call this like the white collar dirty jobs show. Just kind of like I don't actually get to do your job, but I get to like, you know, just kind of see it through your eyes for 40, 50 minutes. So
That's a good way to
that's
say it.
kind of a weird way that I figured it out, but that's how I figured it out. And if you have a response, I don't usually do this in the morning. The Roomba is running, so I'm going to shut the door real quick.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. I
All
heard
good.
the Roomba, I'm like, oh, I knew I should have closed the door. So
That's funny.
but yeah, that's kind of how it's kind of a different way of finding that I had a passion for doing this than I thought. And I had a lot of like imposter syndrome, which
Mm.
I don't know if that's something that you ever face, especially going into something that you kind of just worked your way into. It wasn't something you had a passion for. Did you ever find like any of that coming up along the way?
Oh man, every day, still have it. I think I've learned that imposter syndrome is a bit of a prerequisite to doing anything great with your life. And this isn't a knock on a garbage man or somebody that's like uses the deep fryer at McDonald's or something, but I don't know, I've never been in their shoes, but I don't think they wake up and have this like anxiety around if they belong, if they should be doing what they're doing, right? Like I don't think they worry about what they're trying to accomplish for the day and whether or not they're qualified or unqualified to do it. Whereas I've spent my time in rooms and arenas where I really feel like I don't belong, yet I'm there. And I think that's a normal feeling for when you're pushing your boundaries to growth. That's where growth exists outside the comfort zone. So if I'm pushing into growth, then I think feeling like you're an imposter and you don't belong is really a prerequisite to it. I remember I was in a room in, I think it was St. Louis, at an event that the Arate Syndicate, there are Ed Milet, Andy Frisella put on this event. These are a couple of, like, if you don't know who they are, they're a couple of modern day influencers, leadership coaches, and they got big businesses and 9-figure net worths and billion-dollar valuations, wild stuff. And one of the questions toward the end of the event from the audience talked about imposter syndrome. And I remember Andy Frisella, who owns First Form, who's turned down multi-billion-dollar offers to keep building his business. He paused in the question and asked, he said, hold on, before I answer your question, I just want, by a show of hands in this room, please raise your hand if you feel like today, modern day, not at any point in your life, but still today, that you're going to be found out and someone's going to discover that you really don't know as much as they think you know, and everything's going to crumble because they're going to figure you out and you're just a fake. And literally the whole room, including Andy and Ed's, who got the 9-figure net worth, their hands went up. Everybody's hand went up. And that's when I knew, okay, I'm not alone. This is actually supposed to happen because this is a room of people who I admire, and quite literally every single person feels this. then if I feel it, I know I'm doing the right thing, as opposed to saying I shouldn't be feeling this. So now I kind of enjoy when I feel that twinge of imposter syndrome, because I'm like, oh man, I'm doing something big.
And I have been feeling this way just leading up to tomorrow. I'm supposed to be going to something called Podfest. It's like a con for podcasters, and
Cool.
I have to say that going into this, it is a bit overwhelming, and I have a lot going on in life in general right now, so I think that's fueling some of the
Hmm.
imposter syndrome that I'm like kind of feeling a little bit, because I'm just this small independent podcaster, and it's mainly for like independent podcasters, but uh, I see all these other people doing such awesome things, and you kind of like get, uh, trapped sometimes into that comparison game, which I feel like I've gotten better with, but this is like kind of a big event, and it's kind of a big deal because I'm representing, mark my words, I'm representing my thing, this thing I created out of thin air, and
Mm.
I'm going to this big event. And the thing that helps me is when I go into the Fuva app, it's just basically an app for events like this where people can kind
Okay.
of like connect. I don't know if you or anybody have heard of it. I never heard of it until recently. But
Mm-mm.
there's a lot of people saying, are you feeling nervous? Is anybody nervous? I'm like, okay, that makes me feel a lot better going into this. And I hate even like saying it outwardly, but yeah, I'm a little bit on the nervous side about going, but I know once I get there, that feeling will go away a little bit. But yeah, I mean, even for somebody like me, I've done almost 200 episodes. I've had
Wow.
amazing episodes like this one, and I still have those feelings as well.
Awesome. Yes, that makes sense to me. I think you'll, so long as you're continuing to grow and push the boundaries, you will always feel those feelings. Those are good. Those are part of this story.
Yeah, if you're in your comfort zone too much, it means you might not be growing. I mean, maybe some people are, but I
Yeah.
know I'm probably not. But
Right.
let's talk a little bit about your growth and how you're helping others uh, with reconstructing wealth. So, as somebody who was just, starting up a business, I mean, are you still, or is your approach basically as a solopreneur? Like, how did you, like, start up and get clients and really get going into helping people the way you are now?
Yeah, I began in wealth management 9 years ago, nearly a decade ago, working for as an advisor for a smaller independent firm. They kind of took a chance on me and said, "Hey, I think you'd be great at this," and I'm forever indebted to them. I appreciate them so much, out of Massachusetts, and I built up a clientele there. So So I
Oh,
built up my clientele, all good. So I built up my clientele with them, and I stepped into that journey knowing full well that, like, hey, if I enjoy this, and this seems to become something that I grow a passion in, then I'm starting entrepreneurial day zero at the starting point here when I begin this job. I was a W-2 employee. I was not an entrepreneur. I was more of an intrapreneur at the time. But my mindset was like, this is the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, even though from a tax perspective, I'm not technically an entrepreneur. Because it was on me to find clients and build my own kind of practice within the walls of the firm. And I did that for 7 or 8 years, 7 or 8 years, 7 years or so, until this kind of burning desire inside me, this flame of entrepreneurship turned into a fire. And I just knew in my heart, like, it's the time that I'm supposed to leave these guys, not run from them, but rather run to this calling, run to launching my own thing. And I did that. And it was May of 2024 is when I really kind of hit the ground running. All the compliance approvals and all the things were behind me, and how the kind of the brakes were off. And I was able to start not at zero again, because we haven't mentioned it, but I have 7 kids with my 8th one on the way. I'm the sole provider. So at 40 years old, launching a business with 7 children and being the sole income is a bit of a scary environment to live in. But it wasn't necessarily ground zero, because I had spent the previous 7 years or so building a practice, a skeleton of a practice, we'll call it, to be able to, hopefully, clients will come with me. And thank God, about 95% of the clients did join me. So we were off to the races from day one. But really, my day one was 9 years ago when I stepped into this industry. But that's how I got started.
So first of all, I've had 2 phone calls from spam people from the loan office just during this episode alone.
Insane.
It just
I get them too.
drives
I
me
don't know.
nuts.
Yeah.
Every day, multiple times a day. So that was the loud call that we just heard. Secondly, it's I really wish so. In a sense, I came into this podcast with uh clients, so to speak. Just
Yep.
just guests that I could call on, that I considered friends, that were also like entrepreneurs. But
Yep.
once I got through that, and maybe that was just a conversation that I had with myself, but I knew that I needed to kind of like expand out, just away from people I was familiar with and knew.
Yep.
And I think we all kind of hit that point where, okay, how can we grow and how can we expand? And I took many steps, including Podmatch, which is how we connected. And
Yep.
yeah, that's really what it's all about. So it's amazing, especially on your end, that I have to imagine that doing what I'm doing might actually be a little easier to
Hmm.
find like what you're looking for. So I think it's amazing that you were able to take some of those clients and carry them over to help you get the ball rolling. That's amazing.
Thanks, man. Thanks. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm really grateful for it, because what ends up happening is that over time, people's lives start to change from the inside out. Because I named the firm Reconstructing Wealth because I've learned, after, I would say, thousands of one-on-one conversations at this point, at least, with people about their money. I've learned that we all share, on varying degrees of the spectrum, some jacked up relationship with money. And it usually comes from our childhood. And having 7 of my own, I really understand firsthand that a lot more is caught than taught with children. And because money is such a taboo subject in society, we don't talk about it. So all of our mindsets, habits, beliefs, behaviors around personal finance, about money, are usually caught. They're not usually taught from our parents. And our parents usually caught it from their parents, who are probably, if you're around my age, Great Depression era children. So their mindsets and habits and money are coming from pure scarcity and worry and fear. And that sort of gets passed from generation to generation. And here we are in this generation, the people who have the wealth now, or are going to be inheriting the bulk of wealth, are products of generations of Great Depression era mindsets around money. So when I can reconstruct somebody's relationship with money, to me, becoming financially free is less about having enough money in the bank to fund your life. Financial freedom is really emotionally detaching from your money and just seeing it for what it is. It's a tool to help you live out your life's calling, your life's purpose. And I say that because I know people, I work with people, I've seen plenty of people who have enough money in the bank to fund their life. They're financially free by definition, yet they worry a lot every day about their money. And to me, that's not real freedom if you spend every day worrying. That's just an upgraded cage. And I don't want people to live to upgrade their cages. I want them to really experience freedom. So to be able to have that impact in somebody's life, as long as they're doing their part to pass that to their kids, there's a generational effect, not in the terms of handing tons of money down to the next generation, but what I feel is the more important and the more impactful piece is instilling a new wiring around money so that generations beyond no longer see money as a bad thing, no longer fearful around money, have an understanding around how to use it the way a carpenter knows how to use a hammer. The generations to come are only going to improve upon how to use money effectively to help further the mission. And I can't quantify the generational impact that may have. So that's why I named it Reconstructing Wealth. People don't necessarily start coming to me because they say, "Hey, I have an unhealthy relationship with money." That's more of a discovery in the journey. But maybe one day my branding gets big enough, and people say, "Hey, I think I do. I've been doing my own work, and I want to come to you to help fix it." So for now, though, people come to me the same way they come to Jenny Craig, like, "Hey, I got a wedding in 3 months. I got to lose 50 pounds in 3 inches or whatever it is." Like, they come to me and say, "Hey, I got a bunch of money. I don't know what to do with it. I don't want to screw it up. I have no idea what I'm doing with it. I need a plan. I need to invest it. And I help them make sense of all that.
And that's an amazing service that you're doing because
Thanks,
we're
man.
living in an era right now where even people like me are trying to figure out a bunch of other ways outside of their day to day job of how to make money. And I know this show in particular would love to see it grow more and all that, but that's not even like the central point of doing
Yep.
this. I have like other things that, you know, like even being on TikTok and selling on TikTok, being a
Yep.
live creator. Those are all things that are actually, at least to me, fun ways to make like hopefully a decent amount of money. And
Yep.
there's a lot of people out there trying to chase after things like that, in addition to just trying to have a 40-hour a week job and trying to make that work. And
Hmm.
it's almost like that's not always enough for people these days. And I, I don't think that we always mean to put ourselves in the bind that we put ourselves in. Sometimes, medical stuff comes up, other things might come up, and then
Yep.
just kind of snowballs, and it's hard to, you know, catch up
Hmm.
and get ahead. And next thing you know, you have like 20 grand of credit debt, let's say, and
Yep.
then you're like, okay, now I have to reevaluate. And it's a shame that we have so many stories like that rather than stories of, wow, I grew and now I have like $30,000 in the bank saved up, or I have this system or that system for
Yep.
retirement. And you and I are pretty close in age. I just turned 47 the other day. So
Yep.
I could relate to what you were saying about generations of way yesteryear because my
Yep.
grandmom actually had a bunch of these like bonds that I was free to use and unfortunately did use once they matured. But it was for a good purpose. But now where I'm at, I'm like, I wish I would have saved them. I wonder how much those would have been
Yeah.
worth today. But
They
you
eventually
gotta
stop
do it.
earning. So there's an expiration on the interest on those. I think 30 years or something like that. So maybe you didn't lose out on any extra growth.
No, I maybe a tiny bit because I
Yep.
think by the time I was 27, I started spending them. And I'm glad you said that. It makes me feel a little bit better about that decision as we talk about
Yep.
generations and the lessons that we learned. I frankly I don't have any idea what I learned from my parents. I think the only thing that I really learned was to make sure I don't have a spouse who is like addicted to home shopping and, just I could point out a couple other things, but definitely learn to look out for myself and live at least a little bit within my means if I learned anything from my own parents.
Well, I think living within your means is um, a healthy lesson for sure. It's when living within your means becomes fear, worry, scarcity, hoarding that it kind of morphs into something that's unhealthy. It starts to control you versus you controlling it. And I think that's a really nuanced but really important distinction to say, like, you can have a scarcity mindset in certain areas at certain times, and that will serve you. But by and large, if your wiring and your emotional state lives in this fear, worry, dependent state of like I'm always worrying about my personal finances, that's now your money controls you as opposed to you controlling it. And as far as earning income, here's one nugget that I've taught my kids that I've learned like way later in life, recent years, maybe in the last decade or so, that I stopped looking at money in terms of jobs and careers and which ones pay the best and what can I do to earn the most money. And I recognized it for really what it is. What it is just this exchange of value, meaning, and I don't want this to sound like more pie in the sky. I want this to really like be practical here. It's not pie in the sky thinking. It really is just an exchange of value. And my kids, my oldest is 14 almost, and well, I'll have a newborn in March. So there you go. There's the range. The youngest right now is 2. But I teach them a lot of the things that I just wish I learned when I was young. One of them is about earning money. Like, you don't necessarily go out and say, I'm going to earn money today. And instead, you chase value. Figure out, like we talked about earlier, what are you uniquely gifted, or what can you do for somebody that's going to provide some kind of value to them, that's going to help them make them more money, save them some time, whatever that value looks like. I use the mowing the lawn example. You can go to somebody, a neighbor, and say, hey, I will mow your entire lawn for you, and it might take 2 hours, and I'll do it for $20. And if that person thinks about that for a minute, they may say, hey, my time, maybe they're a salaried employee making $100,000. That's roughly 50-ish dollars an hour, a little more than that. But let's say $50 an hour is their time, if they want to put a quantity on what their time hours are worth during the day. They may look at you and say, wow, 2 hours of my time, that's $100. You're going to charge me $20. That's a great deal. Like, I would do that deal. That's valuable exchange for me. And so they'll give you $20, and you take that, and they get their time back. That's the same reason you can't charge that same person $1,000 to mow their lawn. It's a terrible value exchange. They won't do it. And it's the same reason neurosurgeons who are solving a much bigger problem, like, you're paid in accordance to the size of the problem you solve quite often. If you're going to die because of a brain tumor, but you have this one neurosurgeon that can probably save your life, big problem, big outcomes, high stakes, they're probably going to get paid quite a bit of money because of the value they did. They just gave you your life back. Like, that's a really valuable exchange, and they're going to get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for that one surgery probably. But that's why they can charge a lot, because it's this high problem, high stakes, nuanced skill. You can't charge the same things. You could still make more money as a landscaper, but you just have to understand what problem are you solving for somebody, what value are you providing, and then know if it's a small problem, you have to solve a lot of small problems to get paid a lot of money. If it's a gigantic problem, you don't have to solve as many. You just have to solve a gigantic problem and have that value to be able to provide to people. But when you think about money, you start to chase, all right, what can I do for somebody that's going to help them? And then you go to help somebody and you get paid in return. Like, the money follows. So thinking about that, that's a story as old as time too, by the way. Like, back in the day, they used to trade oxen and cattle and gold and spices. Like, there was no dollar. But they used to say, hey, I think I will take that much gold for this many cattle. That's a good deal. Let's do the deal. Like that's an exchange of value for whatever it was. So people have been trading value for since the dawn of time. We're just using dollar bills today, but that's really the mindset is like, how can I go help somebody else? And in turn, I'm going to get paid for it.
And knowing your value, not only in this context, but especially as like an entrepreneur, I feel like can be a very tricky process. And
Yep.
I feel like that is where people like you who have this awesome mindset that you just laid out, that's where I see your value among other things because I know for me when I think about my own value with not only like maybe this show or sponsorships or whatever, but just other things I've racked my brain about doing to expand. It's that big question mark of like figuring that part out. And I have many things that I can offer, and I know I have a lot to offer, but figuring
Mm.
out like the value in that can be like a very tricky dance. So
Mm.
I don't know if that was your intent with all that, but I feel like there's a lot of wisdom in what you had to say there.
Cool. Well, thanks, man. I'm glad it resonated. It's something to wrestle with. That's like something to take home and say, okay, now how do I man like put that into action in my own life?
Well, I would love to put more questions into action here, but I feel like we're running a little bit short on time.
I know
I just
time flies when
realized,
you're having fun.
yeah, I am having a blast. I didn't realize we were getting close to the top of the hour. So, why don't I give you a chance to tell everybody how they can find you, how they can work with you, and anything else you might want to add?
Sure, man. Well, first off, thank you for having me on the show. It's been fun conversation. It's just an honor to share a seat on your platform. I know that I don't take it lightly, so thank you for it. People,
Absolutely.
if you want to find me and understand who I am and what I'm about, you'll learn some money things. You'll also learn some other parts of me. Um, Instagram's probably the best spot. I'm pretty active there. It's just my name at Matt Morizio, Mattmorizio. Just it's my name. And I'll tell you what, if you follow me on that and send me a DM about this show, I am in the process of transferring from one site to another a 3-part video course that I created on money mindsets and some actual practical blocking and tackling of personal finances and some of the science behind some of what we talked about. And it's free. It might cost an email address, but I'm happy to share that. Like I said, I don't have the website today because I'm transferring it from one hosting place to another, but it's in process. So I will get you that link if you want to send me a DM. It's costs nothing. You could also visit my website, reconstructingwealth.com. If you want to understand the business and our core values and a little more about what we're out, there's a contact page there that I'll see those emails. And I would love to answer any finance questions people have, anything that's going on in their minds that after, hearing this conversation.
Well, Matt, thank you very much for all of that. And thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom today. I feel like there wasn't near enough time. I could have gone another hour. I know I have your website up, was gonna talk about like the core values here, which I think is very cool. You don't always see that with entrepreneurs where they actually lay out their values. And I think values are extremely important, especially when you're doing business and talking business or any kind of relationship, probably in the world, I guess, but especially
Yep.
business. I don't think people always think about values. So I think that's really cool. And was going to take the quiz here during the episode as well, but we have kind of run out of time. So,
Yeah. Well, you have to take it and tell me what you think, and I can talk through the results.
well, Matt, thanks again for being on Mark My Words. I appreciate you being here, appreciate your time, and I wish you continued success with your business. And I think you have an amazing mindset, and I really think you're providing a service that is much needed. So thank you for being here, and thank you to everybody for listening to Mark My Words. I, as always, am your host, Mark Schmidt, and I will see you very soon with a new episode. Bye for now. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.